A sudden gust hauled through Utuka village, rattling doors and shaking rooftops. The villagers stirred in their sleep, their dreams interrupted by the whispers of unseen forces. Something was coming. Ojadike's heart pounded as the fire before him roared with unnatural intensity. The sacred shells scattered across the floor trembled and moved on their own. The spirits were speaking. The dead will walk among the living. A voice, neither male nor female, echoed in his mind. The land is stained with the blood of the innocent. The truth must rise, or Okota will perish. The old priest gasped. His frail body trembling, he knew what this meant. A prophecy foretold generations ago was finally unfolding. The spirits of the unjustly slain were returning, and the kingdom of Okuta was not prepared for what was to come. In the heart of Ukuta, the villagers went about their evening duties, oblivious of the dark omen that loomed over them. Women pounded yams in wooden mortars, children chased fireflies under the moonlight, and the warriors of the land sat in groups, discussing tales of old battles. But then a shrill scream tore through the air. The village froze. The sound came from the sacred forest, a place forbidden after nightfall. Only the spirits and the forgotten dead resided there. A young hunter, Okonkwo, stumbled into the village square, his face pale with terror. I saw them, he gasped. They came from the forest, their skin like the pale ash of the dead. His words sent ripples of fear through the crowd. The elders gathered, their faces dark with concern. We must not speak of this, one of them whispered. The girls are restless. But before another word could be uttered, the ground trembled, and from the shadows of the sacred forest, two figures emerged. They were women, tall and regal, their skin, the unnatural pale of the dead. They were dressed in the royal garments of a time long past, their eyes burning with purpose. The people of Ukuta fell to their knees in horror. The spirits had returned. The air was thick with tension as the villagers stared at the two ghostly women standing before them. Whispers spread like wildfire, fear gripping every soul present. Who are they? Someone murmured. They are the lost ones, an old woman whispered, clutching her chest in shock. Then, in a voice as clear as the morning bell, one of the women spoke. I am Olachi, daughter of King Ikenna. The second woman stepped forward, her eyes scanning the crowd. And I am Nnenna, my sister. A collective gasp rippled through the village. The daughters of King Ikenna, but they had been lost in the great war that had taken their father's life. The spirits have played a cruel trick on us, the village chief muttered, his face pale. No trick, Olachi said, her voice unwavering. We have come to reveal the truth. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. There had always been rumors that King Ikenna's death was not as honorable as they had been told, but no one dared question the new ruler, King Obinze. Nnenna's gaze locked onto the chief. The time for silence is over. The blood of the innocent cries for justice. The wind howled through the village, carrying with it an unmistakable message. Change was coming, and Okota was not ready. The palace of King Obinze was a place of grand beauty, but that night it felt like a prison. News of the spirit's return had reached the throne before dawn, and fear crept into the king's heart like a venomous snake. He sat on his high seat, his fingers drumming anxiously against the armrest. Around him, his council of elders whispered among themselves. The return of Olachi and Nnenna was impossible. They had been dead for 20 years. Your Majesty, one of the elders spoke hesitantly. This could be a test from the gods. Perhaps they wish for a sacrifice. Silence, King Obinze roared, slamming his fist against the armrest. His eyes were wild with uncertainty. He knew the truth. He knew what he had done to their father. The spirits had returned for vengeance. What must we do? Another elder asked nervously. King Obinze stood, his voice grave. We must silence them before the kingdom learns the truth. But deep in his heart, he knew no force in the world could silence the voices of the dead. The people of Ukuta gathered at the village square, their hearts pounding with anticipation. All Lachi and Nnenna stood before them, their outwardly presence commanding silence. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. We have returned to right the wrongs of the past, Olachi declared. For too long, lies have ruled this land. Nnenna's eyes scanned the crowd, locking onto the faces of the elders. You, who swore to protect our father, stood by as he was betrayed. You watched as his blood was spilled. Murmurs of shock and disbelief erupted from the villagers. Could it be true? Had their beloved King Ikenna been murdered? King Obinze's guards stepped forward, weapons in hand. Enough of this nonsense, one of them shouted. But Olachi only smiled. You fear us because you know the truth. And now the people will know it too. She raised her hand, and a sudden gust of wind blew through the village. The ground trembled and the sky darkened. The spirits were no longer asking. They were demanding justice. The air in Ukuta was thick with unease. The villagers whispered behind closed doors, their minds heavy with the revelation from the night before. Could it be true? Had King Ikenna been betrayed? If so, what did it mean for the kingdom and the rule of King Obinze? In the palace, the tension was unbearable. King Obinze sat in his chamber, his hands trembling. The spirits had spoken. The truth he had buried for 2 decades was clawing its way to the surface. His most trusted advisor, DK, entered with his solemn face. Your Majesty, the people are restless. Many believe the spirits are right. Obinze slammed his cup on the wooden table. The people believe because they are weak-minded. These spirits must be silenced before they turn my own subjects against me. DK hesitated before speaking again. What if we hear them out? If we declare our innocence and perform a ritual, perhaps they will return to the land beyond. Obinze's eyes darkened. You think they want peace? No, DK, they want vengeance. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young messenger entered, his forehead drenched in sweat. Your Majesty, he stammered, the spirits, they have summoned the village to the sacred grove. Obinze's heart pounded. The dead were not done speaking. The sacred grove was an ancient place, feared and respected by all. It was where the ancestors watched over Ukuta, where oaths were taken and never broken. As the villagers gathered, Olachi and Nnenna stood at the center, their ghostly forms bathed in the light of the setting sun. Their expressions were calm, but their eyes burned with purpose. We have come to demand justice, Olachi declared. Before all of Okuta, let the truth be spoken. The elders shifted uncomfortably. They knew what was coming. Nnenna's voice cut through the air like a blade. Who among you was loyal to our father, and who stood aside while he was betrayed? The silence was suffocating. Then, from the crowd, an old man stepped forward. It was Ichie Okorie, the former right hand of King Ikenna. His frail body shook as he spoke. The truth must be told. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Obinze, standing among his guards, went pale. Ichie Okorie swallowed hard before speaking. King Ikenna did not die in battle. He was murdered. A cry of horror rang out. The night before the war, the old man continued. A meeting was held in this very grove. A sacred pact was made to deliver the king into the enemy's hands. In exchange, Ukuta would be spared from destruction. Nnenna's eyes locked onto Obinze. And who led this betrayal? The old man turned, his gaze heavy with sorrow. It was King Obinze himself. A wave of shock rippled through the village. Some screamed, others wept. The truth long buried, had finally been unearthed. The accusation hung in the air like a curse. King Obinze stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. "You dare accuse me?" he thundered. "You dare listen to the whispers of the spirits and call it truth?" Ichie Okorie did not waver. "You can deny it, but the gods have already judged you." The villagers murmured. Doubt was creeping into their hearts. Obinze had ruled for 20 years, but had they been living under the shadow of a murderer? The king drew his sword. "If these spirits wish for war, they shall have it." With a single motion, he ordered his guards to seize Olachi and Nnenna, but the spirits did not flinch. Instead, Olachi raised her hand, and a fierce wind howled through the grove. The warriors staggered back, their weapons falling from their hands. Nnenna's voice was calm. "You cannot fight the dead, Obinze." The ground beneath them trembled. The ancestors of Ukuta were rising. The earth was rejecting its first king. Obinze felt fear. The night sky turned red as an unnatural storm swirled above the sacred grove. The people of Ukuta fell to their knees, their voices lost in prayers. A deep rumble echoed through the land, and from the depths of the earth, a spectral figure emerged, the spirit of King Ikenna. His towering form loomed over Obinze, his eyes filled with sorrow of betrayal. "Why, my brother?" his voice boomed. "Was my crown worth the blood?" Obinze trembled, but did not answer. The spirits of the warrior, long past, emerged behind Ikenna, their forms wraithed in glow of the ancestral realm. They carried no weapons, yet their presence alone was enough to make the living cower. King Ikenna raised his hand. "Let the land decide your fate." The ground beneath Obinze cracked. A force unseen dragged him to his knees, his screams piercing the air. The earth itself was swallowing him whole. The villagers watched in horror, but none dared intervene. They knew this was justice. With one final cry, Obinze vanished beneath the soil. The land, claiming what had been stolen. Then, as if the gods themselves had signed, the storm ceased. The night was calm once more. The spirits of Olachi and Nnenna stood at the village square, their forms beginning to fade. Their purpose had been fulfilled. The truth had been spoken. Justice had been served. The people of Ukuta fell to their knees, tears in their eyes. "Forgive us," an elder whispered. "We did not know." Olachi smiled softly. "You must not dwell on the past, but you must never forget." Nnenna turned to the young warriors. "Lead with honor. Do not let greed poison your hearts as it did Obinze." As the first lights of dawn bathed the land, the spirits of the lost slowly faded into wind, returning to the realm beyond. Ukuta had been given a second chance, and this time the people vowed never to let history repeat itself. With King Obinze gone and the spirits at peace, the people of Ukuta faced the daunting task of rebuilding not just their kingdom, but their very identity. The night of the judgment had left the elders shaking. They felt the burden of their silence. At the village square, the people gathered, their faces reflecting sorrow and relief. Ichie Okorie, the oldest of the elders, stood before them, his frail hands gripping his staff. "We were blind," he admitted. "We allowed a traitor to rule us. We turned our backs on justice, and because of that, our ancestors had returned from the land of the dead to correct our wrongs." A solemn murmur spread through the crowd. "Now we must decide the future of Ukuta," he continued. "Who among us is worthy to lead?" The question hung in the air. Many eyes turned to Nnamdi, the son of the late King Ikenna. He had been just a boy when his father was betrayed, and now, as a grown man, he stood tall, his face carved with the hardships of exile. Nnamdi stepped forward. "I do not seek power," he said. but I seek justice for the future of Ukuta. If my people will have me, I will lead not as a king who rules with fear, but as one who serves with wisdom." The people erupted in agreement. After years of deception and tyranny, they needed a leader whose heart was pure. Ukuta had chosen its new ruler. The coronation of Nnamdi was unlike any coronation Ukuta had ever seen. There were no grand feasts, no extravagant displays of wealth, just a solemn gathering of a people determined to begin anew. As the sacred crown was placed upon his head, Nnamdi bowed before the village, pledging his loyalty not to power but to justice. His first decree was clear: "We shall honor the dead, not only with words, but with deeds." Every leader of Ukuta will now swear an oath before the ancestors to uphold truth and fairness, lest they too be judged. The elders nodded in approval. This was the lesson they had learned the hard way. Betrayal would never again be allowed to fester within their land. But as Nnamdi spoke, a man in the crowd trembled with unease. It was Dike, the late King Obinze's closest advisor. He had stood by Obinze's side through every deceitful act. And now, with new ruler in power, fear gripped his heart. Would the past truly be forgiven, or would justice still come to those who had enabled the tyrant's reign? DK could not sleep. The whispers of the past tormented him, filling his nights with visions of King Ikemna's betrayal and Obinze's final moments. He had thought himself safe, believing that with Obinze's fall, his sins would be forgotten. But deep down, he knew the ancestors did not forget so easily. One night, as he walked along the riverbank, he saw an old woman sitting on a rock, staring into the water. Her presence was unsettling. Her eyes, though dim with age, seemed to pierce straight through him. "You cannot run from the past, DK," he said without turning. He froze. Who are you?" "I am but a voice of the wind," she replied, "a whisper from the land of the dead." DK staggered backward. "What do you want from me?" "The question is, what do you want from yourself?" she asked. "Will you seek forgiveness, or will you perish in the weight of your own guilt?" Tears burned DK's eyes. He had betrayed a good king. He had watched Obinze destroy an entire kingdom, and yet he had done nothing. Falling to his knees, he whispered, "What must I do?" The old woman smiled faintly. "Confess, let the truth be known. Only then will your soul be free." The wind howled through the trees, and when Dike looked up, the woman was gone. He knew what he had to do. At the next gathering of the elders, Dike stood before the council, his voice trembling. "There is one last truth that must be spoken," he announced. The people of Ukuta listened in silence as he revealed the depth of Obinze's treachery, how he had plotted against Ikemna, how he had lied to his own people, and how Dike himself had played a part by standing idly by. The elders exchanged grim looks. They had long suspected that Obinze had not acted alone, but hearing the truth from Dike's own lips sent shivers through them. "You have betrayed this land," Ichie Okore said, his voice heavy with judgment. "But you have also done what many would not. You have confessed. For that, we leave your fate to the new king." All eyes turned to Nnamdi. The young king studied Dike, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Banishment!" A gasp ran through the crowd. "You will leave Ukuta, never to return," Nnamdi decreed. "Let your days be spent in reflection, so that when you meet our ancestors in the next world, you will have an answer for your sins." Tears streamed down Dike's face. He had been spared, but his punishment was worse than death. He would live as a man without a home, forever carrying the weight of his choices. As he walked away from Ukuta, he whispered a final prayer to the wind, and the wind did not whisper back. With the truth finally revealed and justice served, Ukuta began its slow journey to healing. The ghosts of the past no longer lingered, but their lessons remained. Under Nnamdi's rule, fairness became the foundation of the kingdom. No longer would greed or betrayal be tolerated. The people swore oaths to the ancestors, promising to never allow another tyrant to rise. The village flourished. The land, once cursed by bloodshed, now bore rich harvest. The people, once divided by fear, now stood united in hope. At the shrine of the ancestors, Olachi and Nnenna's spirits stood one last time. The kingdom is safe now, Olachi whispered. Nnenna nodded. It is time to go. As the first light of dawn bathed Ukuta, the sisters faded into the wind, their souls finally at peace. And in the heart of the kingdom, Nnamdi stood on the palace steps, watching the sun rise on a new era, an era built not on lies, but on truth. The dead had spoken, and the living had listened. Nnamdi had won the people's trust, but ruling a kingdom was far more difficult than reclaiming it. The weight of his father's legacy sat heavy on his shoulder. Every morning, he woke before dawn, walking through the village to speak with farmers, traders, and warriors. He listened, observed, and learned. Ukuta was healing, but scars remained. Some elders still whispered in corners, clinging to their old ways. Some families mourned loved ones lost to Obinze's reign. Others feared that peace would not last. One evening, as Nnamdi sat in council, an elder named Ichie Udoka rose. "My king, the people believed in you," he said, "but faith alone will not build Ukuta. We must take action." Nnamdi nodded. "Tell me, wise one, what do you propose?" "The land must be restored," Ichie Udoka continued. "For years, Obinze's greed drained our farmlands. Our warriors grew weak. Our markets suffered. We must make Ukuta strong again, not just in spirit, but in wealth and power." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Nnamdi stood. "Then let us begin," he declared. Ukuta shall rise again, not through fear, but through hard work and unity. The people had spoken. The rebuilding had begun. The weeks that followed were filled with labor and determination. Farmers replanted crops, blacksmiths reforged weapons, and traders reopened their stalls. The once quiet marketplace buzzed with life again. Nnamdi personally oversaw the restoration of the palace, ensuring that it was no longer a place of tyranny, but a house of justice. He appointed trusted advisors, not based on wealth or age, but on wisdom and integrity. Among them was Adeze, a fearless woman who had once been exiled for speaking against Obinze. She had returned when the kingdom was freed and proved herself to be a voice of reason and fairness. "My king," she said one day, "we must not only look inward." The neighboring kingdoms watched as Ukuta fell into darkness. "If we are to be strong again, we must mend those broken ties." Nnamdi knew she was right. Ukuta had once been respected across the land, but Obinze's rule had turned them into a kingdom of treachery. "It is time to make peace," he agreed, "and I shall go myself." A king traveling to another kingdom without an army was unheard of. But Nnamdi was not like other kings. He did not wish to rule by fear. He wished to rule by example. Nnamdi's first journey was to the kingdom of Umweze, whose king had once been his father's closest ally. But when Obinze took power, their friendship had shattered. As Nnamdi and his small entourage arrived at the palace gates, the guards hesitated. The wounds of the past were still fresh. "Tell your king that Nnamdi of Ukuta comes, not with war, but with peace," he declared. After a long pause, the gates opened. King Ezanya sat on his throne, his face unreadable. "The last time a king of Ukuta stood before me, he spoke only of power and greed," he said. "Why should I trust you?" Nnamdi removed his crown and placed it on the ground. "My symbol of humility," Because I am not a predecessor, he said. Ukuta is not what it once was. We seek friendship, not conquest. We seek to heal, not to harm. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then slowly, King Ezanya rose. Then let peace begin, he said. A bond was rekindled, and Ukuta took its first step toward redemption. While Nnamdi walked to restore peace outside the kingdom, danger lurked within. In the shadows, a group of elders who had once supported Obinze plotted against the new king. They feared change, longing for the days when wealth and power belonged to a select few. We must act, one of them whispered. If we do nothing, Ukuta will slip from our grasp forever. Their plan was simple: assassinate Nnamdi and seize power before the people could react. But they underestimated the loyalty of Ukuta's warriors. One evening, as the conspirators met in secret, a young guard named Chibuzo overheard their whispers. He had fought alongside Nnamdi during the uprising. He had seen the truth with his own eyes. Without hesitation, he rushed to the palace, breathless. "My king, there is treachery among us," he cried. Nnamdi listened carefully, his face unreadable. But deep down, he had expected this. The ghosts of the past did not fade easily. With quiet resolve, he summoned the elders to the palace the next morning. They arrived unsuspecting, only to find themselves surrounded by warriors. "You sought to betray your own people once more," Nnamdi declared, "but Ukuta will not fall into darkness again." The traitors fell to their knees, begging for mercy, and Nnamdi, though firm, chose justice over vengeance. "You are stripped of your titles and wealth," he decreed. "You will spend your remaining days serving the people you once sought to exploit." And so, the last remnants of Obinze's rule were swept away. Ukuta was truly free. Years passed, and under Nnamdi's reign, Ukuta became stronger than ever. Peace flourished, trade expanded, and justice reigned. The people no longer feared the ancestors, they honored them. The spirits no longer lingered in sorrow, they rested in peace. One evening, as Nnamdi stood on the palace balcony, watching the village glow under the moonlight, Adeze joined him. "You have done what many thought was impossible," she said. He smiled faintly. "I did not do it alone. Ukuta was saved, not by one man, but by its people." She nodded. "And by the dead who refused to be forgotten." As the wind whispered through the trees, Nnamdi knew that the ancestors were watching, not in anger, not in sorrow, but in pride. And so, the story of Ukuta became legend, passed down through generations, a tale of betrayal and redemption, of truth and justice, a tale that reminded all who heard it that no kingdom, no people, and no soul was beyond salvation, if only they chose the path of truth. The moral lesson of this story is that leadership is service. The true leaders put their people first, not their own power or wealth. The past must be confronted. Ignoring past mistakes only allows them to repeat.